Certainly is, and it's great to be with you. Well, you might recall at the end of last year there were changes to South Australia's liquor licensing laws, and I have to say there's still a fair bit of confusion about what the changes really mean. So I thought today we'd work through the amendments and explain what's changed and who is affected. To help talk us through, we have Dini Soulio, the Commissioner and Business Services Commissioner. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Good to see you. Also, Chief Inspector Greg Hutchins, Officer in charge of the Police Licensing Enforcement Branch. How are you, Greg?
Yeah, good, thank you, Alan.
And Senior Sergeant Helen Nuske, is it?
That's right.
It is, yes. How are you? You're
well.
also from the Licence Enforcement Branch. Dini, let's begin with you. What were the changes that kicked in on the 18th of December last year?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Alan, the government undertook an independent review of the Liquor Licensing Act, and one of the things that came out of that consultation through that process was concerns about minors going to parties and getting access to alcohol. So one of the initiatives that came out of that was amendments to the Act that created offences for supplying alcohol to minors other than in licensed premises. It's always been an offence to sell alcohol to a minor in a pub or
so
a
nothing's changed there?
No. But in relation to what we were seeing is a number of functions, parties, after prom parties and things like that, where we had people organising these events. They were told about 15 minutes beforehand where they were on Facebook, and then they'd end up in some warehouse in Wingfield or, things like that. So there was concerns certainly raised by the police at the time during the course of that review. And that's the main focus of this legislation, that creates an offence to supply alcohol to minors. What was found during the course of the consultation was people were getting around the laws by effectively saying, bring your own alcohol, we'll pour it for you, but it's your alcohol, so therefore we're not supplying it. So these amendments effectively say that if I serve you alcohol, even if it's your alcohol and you're a minor, then I'm guilty of an offence.
Having been through this with both of my teenage kids, I've got to say I always was very, very suspicious, because there were even forms. It was very well organised, these after parties. There were forms sent home for mum and dad to sign. Yes, I approve of your child to have 2 drinks or 2 cans or 2 or 1 or whatever. Yep. And we used to sit back and scratch our heads and say, well, hang on, this can't be legal. But the wording made it look, it was okay.
Yeah, and some of them, and this to a certain extent clarifies what the law was around there. And there's the Act as it was previously is basically silent on whether you can serve alcohol to a minor in your own home or in a private environment, and that's why this is trying to make it clarified that, and this is an opportunity for parents to say, no, I don't want my child to be drinking under 18, and certainly from my point of view, encourage people to wait as long as they can before they start drinking. We don't necessarily need 16, 17-year-olds drinking. So, but there are people who allow their kids to have a drink. So the idea behind this is making sure that people who make it lawful, make it unlawful for people to serve alcohol to your child without your permission.
Okay, so the law is retained that if you are under 18, it is against the law for you to drink, buy or have possession of alcohol.
That's correct.
It's as simple as that. Nothing's changed there.
Nothing's changed in there except the fact that you are allowed to have alcohol in your home, for example, if you're properly supervised.
We'll get to that. But otherwise, when you're outside of home or not with your mother and father or your guardians,
that's right,
you are not permitted to have alcohol if you're under the age of 18.
Definitely not, no. To possess or consume.
Pretty black and white, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. Still a lot of confusion about it, though.
Oh, there is, and part of the confusion becomes where people see people having parties and kids having parties, and the parents away, and people get their friends to come over to their house, and there's some of the concerns that that people have, and we've had a number of questions through this as to if I go away and my child has a party, am I liable to be prosecuted for that? And so part of that is trying to get the message out. So we're working with schools to help get the message out and understanding around what this means.
So what is the answer to the question you posed? If I go away, leave my teenage kids at home, and they're under 18, and they get a few mates around and they have a few stubbies, can I be liable?
Yeah. So you as the parent aren't liable on the basis that you weren't aware, you didn't leave the alcohol there and say go your hardest while I'm away. But certainly the minors who are there consuming alcohol without parental consent may be liable for an offence. So it's an important message to kids if something gets out of hand that they could be prosecuted and then have a conviction against their name that carries with them.
Yeah, a very important point. Okay, well, we've cleared that up. So no change there. If I'm under 18, I cannot have any alcohol in my possession, purchase it or be carrying it or whatever.
Outside.
Outside. And no alcohol in the public place. No changes to that law? No. Okay. So what did change? There was a change brought in if the under 18 is with their parental guardian.
Yeah, so what this created, and to be honest, South Australia was the last state to have any laws in relation to supply of alcohol to minors. So this brings us into line with basically all the other states who have similar legislation. And the change is that if I decide that I want to give my child a drink at home or a drink or two at home, and he's 16 or 17, he's got a couple of friends over, it's unlawful for me to give alcohol to his friends without his parents' permission. So it creates some control for the parents, because what the feedback through the consultation was that people were saying, my son goes to his friend Jim's house and comes back and he's drunk, and I have no control and no say in it. This now creates that offence. So that's really the big change in relation to that. But the main aim of the amended legislation was to address the issues in relation to the warehouse parties and the after-prom parties. Right. And that was more aimed at the organisers of these events to create offences to where they were actually just pouring the alcohol for the kids. So, as I said before, SAPOL looked to take action against an organiser of one of these events, and I think it was one that got out of hand. We went to court, and the court's position in relation to that was people were bringing their own alcohol, they were drinking their own alcohol, it wasn't actually supply, and therefore the charges didn't stand. So we've got these people who are organising these events, DJs, big parties, paying a fee to go in, and the amendments that came in December makes that clear that that's actually an offence if you're supplying that alcohol. Right,
okay. Let's get back to the legal side of it, though. I've got a 17-year-old, and I'm allowing my 17-year-old son or daughter to have a red wine over dinner or with a couple of mates or whatever. Aren't I just encouraging... Aren't these new laws encouraging us to allow our kids to drink earlier?
Well, the new laws don't encourage that, because the legislation previously is completely silent on it. So there's nothing stopping you doing that before. What this is doing is saying if you're going to serve alcohol to my child, you need my permission before you do that, which didn't exist before. That then gives the opportunity, A, for me to say no and not allow my child to go, or say to you, no, you can't serve my child alcohol. It also creates a environment where there is a discussion around alcohol and young people, and start to discuss the risks associated with alcohol, particularly drinking at that age. So the part of the reason for bringing this in was actually to make it clear that you can't just give someone's child alcohol. The encouragement side of it doesn't exist on the basis that people could do it before, and you didn't have to get my permission to give alcohol to my child, whereas now you do, and I know about it. Yeah. And it's an offence not to. So I think that's where, in fact, it's arguably discouraging the service of alcohol to minors unless you have the parents' consent. And a number of parents we spoke to said, I don't want my child having alcohol, but by the time I know about it, it's too late. So I haven't had the chance to say no. So that's what a lot of this legislation's about, is being in a position where we can say, I don't want my child to be drinking, or I want to have a conversation with them if they are going to have a drink. And, I think to say that 16, 17-year-olds aren't drinking when they're catching up with their mates is probably naive to that point. So this is actually creating an opportunity for that discussion to happen, and to make sure that the parents of those kids are aware of it, rather than finding out when the kid gets poured into their house at 2 o'clock in the morning. So
in a bad state.
Yes, that's right. Or get the phone call to come and pick them up from a warehouse in Wingfield or something like that. So
absolutely, yeah. And then really have to try to find the warehouse at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Exactly right. So and like I said, we've had that comment a couple of times, but this is really in response to feedback that was given during the course of the review that said, I'm concerned that my child goes to a party or goes to a friend's house and gets served drinks, and I know nothing about it, and I don't want that to happen. And, I think kids do drink, but we're in a situation where we can actually have a discussion about it and say no when we want to, and that creates that offence.
We're talking about alcohol in the law, the new liquor licensing amendments. If you've got any comments or experiences down this alley, give us a call, 8223 0000. And it's 14 minutes away from 2. Great to be with you. We're talking about the liquor licensing amendments that kicked in December last year. And the law was about where you can drink, where you can buy the booze, and particularly children, and whether or not youths under 18 can drink. Well, the upshot is there's no change to the law. Youths under 18 cannot drink unless they have specific permission from their parents and or their guardians, and that's quite clear, those circumstances. Let's now talk to Chief Inspector Greg Hutchins from the Licensing Enforcement Branch of South Australian Police. Greg, this is obviously going to make it a lot easier now that we have black and white laws that are spelling out exactly what circumstances we can all, partake.
Oh, absolutely, Alan. Look, and it certainly provides clarity to our uniformed people on the ground, who are the ones who will be the first responders to these parties. There's clear offences now where there wasn't before, so it gives them a lot of clarity, and so gives them direction and a good understanding of what they can and can't do. Because obviously the main issue here is, teenagers will be teenagers, but it's about protecting them.
Yes, yeah. And as Dini said, it sort of came off the back of, for years we've had these after parties being held in the suburbs and in some of the industrial areas. I can speak from experience that I know of a couple that have actually been cancelled since then, because the law is black and white there now. There's no grey area.
No, that's exactly right. And, the law was specifically brought in to target these potentially high-risk parties, and you need this legislation to be able to effectively give control back to the parents. That's what we want. The parents need to, have that conversation, need to be able to engage with their children and discuss with them the issues around alcohol.
Now, if there are still some after parties happening, because we are heading into the formal season pretty soon, and if I do get a letter saying, will you give permission for your child to, have 1 or 2 cans or whatever, what should I do? Clearly I shouldn't fill in the form because it has no legal standing. Should I ring you guys?
Oh, look, yeah, absolutely. Look, and there's a couple of ways you can ring through the police. Obviously, the well-known one is through Crime Stoppers. That's been around for many, many years, and it's a, wonderfully successful initiative. Separately, we have on our police website, there's actually a party form that you can fill out, download, fill out, and send it through to the police.
Oh, okay. To alert you that a party's being held?
Yes, it's actually called a party safe notification form.
Okay, right.
So can I just clarify?
Yeah.
The permission form will still apply if someone's having a party if you're having a party at your house, for example,
right,
and
yeah,
your friends, and you want to get permission from another parent to serve alcohol, if that's the case, then certainly if they send you a form, you can give that permission for your child if you're willing to do so. Again, that's each parent's choice about how they parent and whether they want to provide alcohol earlier, but you certainly can sign.
But the permission form for an after party that the parents won't be at, that won't necessarily apply.
If they're not being supervised responsibly by someone and they're being charged money to attend, then that may be an unlawful party.
Right. Okay. Yeah. What actions do you do when you get called out? What do you actually do, Greg? It must be a tough one.
From a police perspective, we're well resourced. It's a matter of responding, assessing what's presenting in front of you. There'll be a number of considerations that we need to go through. The numbers present, the intoxication level, the amount of alcohol present, and a variety of other local environmental factors. But each case would have to be assessed on its own merits. But clearly, for these high risk parties, there's going to be no tolerance. And we will take positive action.
So what if you get called out to 2:00 in the morning to an address, a private party, there's no adults present, and they're all off their faces? How do you sort of pin down who's to blame?
Look, it may take a little while to sort itself out. But clearly, you know, we need to respond there with enough resources that we can handle the situation that's occurring. And there may be potentially a number of offences, not only, you know, with liquor licensing offences under that Act, but potentially other more serious type offences that need to be investigated. And clearly, if there's no adult present, you know, we will take action. There's offences for the children, for possessing and potentially consuming, so they could be expedited or even taken to court. And clearly, you know, as I said earlier, you know, protection of the children is absolutely paramount. And there may be, depending on their ages, other things that we need to do. You know, there may be occasions where we need to start making a few phone calls, you know, to parents potentially.
Yeah, to alert them this is what's going on, perhaps while they're away for the weekend. So it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you get called and that, say, if there's a dozen youths there under the age of 18, they're off their faces, you could charge them all and they'd all end up with a charge on their record. This is what the young people have to realise, isn't it? Without sounding as though we're preaching to them.
Look, broadly speaking, that is a possibility. That, you know, if you can show that they have been possessing and consuming alcohol, yes.
It's a pretty, you know, it can be a big mistake, can't it? I mean, we've all made mistakes as youngsters, but
no, that's right.
This is pretty serious.
And it may be an expiation, or depending on the nature of it, it may be a prosecution. But again, it is something that we'll be carrying and becomes a very expensive night out if that does happen. So it's important that kids are aware of their responsibilities.
Helen, what's been your experience with it since the new laws kicked in?
Yes, Helen, my involvement has been, I guess, right from the ground up. I was involved in the consultation when the legislation was under review, and then once it was passed through Parliament, I was involved in developing the training programs for our officers, so they're well aware and they know exactly what the legislation states and what powers they have, as well as having information available that's accessible for them on the police intranet site, as well as developing corporate training, so all our police officers were trained in relation to it.
And I can imagine this has probably made it a lot easier for your officers because it's the law is now there in black and white. We know exactly where we stand.
Exactly right. They now know what action they can take.
Yeah. Has that been an issue in the past that you know, you've had to sort of make a decision on the spot?
Well, I guess historically, when they would turn up at the warehouse parties in the industrial areas, there was that difficulty in policing those events and how they could respond to them. So now this gives them some clear guidelines and parameters that they can work with.
Let's get back to the issue of being able to consume alcohol as an under 18 when you're in the company or with the approval of your parents or caregivers. What officially is a caregiver? Do I have to be registered as the responsible person, Dini?
No, I think the general definitions around guardian apply. So if someone is responsible and for that child's care and welfare
at that time,
yes,
yeah. So it could be my big brother.
Sorry,
could be my big brother.
So it needs to be a responsible adult. And we'd certainly be making sure that people understand what their responsibilities are in that regard. So it's not just getting your 17-year-old brother to approve your 16-year-old having a drink. So it's making sure that they are ultimately responsible.
Now, what are the penalties for failing to obey the new laws?
So a person who supplies alcohol to a minor is, if found guilty of an offence, is liable to prosecution of $10,000 or an expiation of $500, and a minor who consumes or possesses alcohol as a maximum penalty of $2,000 or an expiation of $210.
Ouch!
Yes, expensive night out.
Not too good for a 16-year-old.
No, exactly right. So there's a few.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg, where do we go from here? How long do you reckon this is going to cut through? You're saying it's taking a while for people to actually realise that the rules and regulations have changed.
Oh, look, Alan, I think the legislation is quite new, and programs such as this, certainly push out that message.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely paramount. That parents, as we've said previously, do take control and have control. Engage with their children in relation to the consumption of alcohol. And clearly, with that comes significant responsibilities for that parent. If you are yourself going to be supplying, a child with alcohol, you obviously got to maintain, close supervision of them. You yourself can't be intoxicated, and likewise you can't allow the child to become, intoxicated.
Now, I was going to ask you about that. Me, as the responsible adult, I've got to be sober myself. Does that mean I have to be under 0.05?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any.
No limit.
I don't think there's any particular limit.
No, it's the test of basically the general test of intoxication, and you're affected to the point that your judgment's affected and things like that. So certainly, and as is going to be the case with a lot of this, a common sense approach is going to apply to it. We got a number of questions early on around this as to whether if at Christmas lunch I give my 17-year-old daughter a glass of champagne, are the police suddenly going to kick my door in and arrest me? And that's obviously not the intention of this legislation, but that was the sort of the fear that was being raised through those communications early on. So it's certainly aimed at trying to protect people who don't have that support, or potentially where people are in a situation where they're getting access to large amounts of alcohol irresponsibly, and we know the damage that can do.
Yeah. So to summarise, you would all encourage people who find that they've got invites or whatever to actually alert the police that this is going on, and you can have a bit of a squeeze and just make sure that doesn't necessarily mean the function won't go ahead. It means it'll go ahead legally.
That's right, and it's the opportunity for the police or my office to have a discussion with the organisers or the parents, or and to make them understand their obligations, and also what is responsible service of alcohol, and what are the repercussions if they don't. So it's important to know beforehand. It gives you some peace of mind as a parent, and it means that your child's going to come home safely afterwards.
All right. Thank you for clearing that up. Certainly, it's black and white there. We now know what the new rules are. Thanks so much, all of you, and we'll catch you next time to see you at the next party.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
But we'll be drinking responsibly. Trust me.